Hey, everybody, welcome back to Practical Liberty. My name's Henry Bingaman, and wow, I can't even say my name today. That is embarrassing to start a podcast. My name is Henry Bingaman. It's like I'm a 4-year-old now, learning to say it for the first time. I am here again with Nick Watts, whose name I have never stumbled over. Nick, what's going on, man?
Not a whole lot. Glad to be with you again here in sunny, summery Australia.
Oh, it is 39 degrees here and raining right now, it's not even good winter weather. If we're going to have winter, I at least want snow in the mountains. It's so depressing right now.
So I did university in a place called Armidale, and it was up in the mountains, but it was just at exactly that wrong altitude where it's as cold as it can be without quite snowing. So it would snow, but only like once out of every 3 or 4 years. So most
Well,
years
I
it would just get just cold enough to not snow, but be really bitter.
the depressing thing for me is I live right between all these ski slopes, and they do make artificial snow. So I'll go snowboarding every once in a while. But last week, we finally got like a foot and a half of snow in over 2 days, which was great, except I was leaving for a mastermind in Vegas where there is no snow. And then when I'm in Vegas, it starts snowing again. And then I come home and it starts raining on the snow. So I missed the entire, apparently, ski season in Pennsylvania this year, which is just kind of depressing.
So I will say I love snowboarding. I absolutely love it, and it's a shame I hardly ever get to do it because I live in effectively southern hemisphere's Florida.
Yeah, it makes it difficult. Well, you could surf though. I don't have a lot of good surfing waters in the lakes in Pennsylvania.
That's true. Australia, I've been a lot of places, and I think it's fair to say Australia has the best beaches. I think
Oh, all
globally,
right.
very possibly the best. I've done Hawaii, I've done Indonesia, I've done Papua New Guinea surfing, all these places. I've surfed the south of France. Australia's where it's at.
All right. I will I've never been surfing at all, so I'll take your word for it, but I've never been to Australia either. So, got a lot of things I haven't experienced yet in this world. Lots of time to go though, hopefully. So, we have a couple business topics that we wanted to touch on before we get into our normal cultural um, discussions that devolve into whatever we want them to be. And the first one is everybody that's watching this probably knows we are working on a SaaS launch, a startup here. And so we've been talking about basically how to get ourselves out there. How do we start? So you had a question about scaling and whether or not it makes sense to think about scaling from customer one or if we should wait a little longer. So do you want to articulate that a little better than I just did?
Yeah, so we're at the stage where we're getting closer and closer to launching, and there's technical decisions that need to be made that are going to affect, where we're at 6 months, a year down the road. And so I'm kind of looking at the technical decisions, going, do we do what's easy now and will work for a while, or what takes a bit more work up front, but will totally work even once we get lots more customers? So, where's that trade off between doing things that will be good for long term scalability but take more work up front, or things that are quick to get out the door, but you'll probably need to change them as you start to get customers? So I'm thinking through a bunch of those different things, but one of those things at the moment for us is how are we going to go about taking payments? And we've been talking about payment processes and bank accounts and how to settle that up.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the first thing you actually have to worry about is your first customer. Like we need our first customer before we can worry about scaling to 1,000 customers and then 10,000 customers, right? So I think you do whatever it takes to get the first handful of customers in, and you want to. I would say we want to remove as much friction as possible from that process. So I'm not worried as much. I would rather actually do the extra work later to make it more scalable later on, but have a viable business that we don't get frustrated with because we're built to have 1,000 customers and we have four and it's not working, right? I think the most important thing is getting customers, and you get customers the first time, however you get customers. You don't really worry. You worry always about the next one until you have, let's say, 100, and then you worry about the next 100. And then when you have 200, you worry about the next 200, and then you start worrying about scale at that point when you have something that's paying for itself. um, and we're not eating ourselves in server costs and marketing and all that stuff. So I like the idea of getting the first customer, doing whatever it takes to get the first customer as easily and smoothly as possible, and then worrying about scale later. Because if you start focusing too much on scale, if you start trying, like we're a bootstrapped company, right? We're not taking funding. We don't have a long runway that we can burn through. So the first priority of every business is getting sales, and then the second priority is getting more sales and accommodating the business to get more scales.
Yeah, so this is one of the big things I've had to learn Is worry about getting sales first and worry about fulfilling those sales second.
No, I was going to say, because this ties into another thing we were talking about as far as taking payments uh, for my own business, for my other, the Freedom Business Network stuff with my freelancing courses and my coaching and all that. I just started taking Bitcoin on the Lightning Network as payment, but I don't have a scalable solution because I'd have to change shopping carts. The shopping cart I use, Thrivecart, does not accommodate for Bitcoin solutions, um, Bitcoin payments in any way or any type of crypto. So I could switch over to WooCommerce or a couple of the other shopping carts that have a little bit of that integration, but even those are really ugly integrations, and I don't necessarily like them, and there's fees attached. So right now, I just have a if you want to pay in Bitcoin, email me and we'll set it up, which is not a scalable solution. And it doesn't handle any recurring payments. So if it's an ongoing thing, I'm gonna have to email you every month with a new transaction ID. But again, it's getting those first couple customers in the door. And I'd rather, I'd feel like a hypocrite not taking Bitcoin payments with how much I talk about Bitcoin. So I feel like I have to offer that option, and I want to. I'd rather take Bitcoin than dollars, right? Get paid in an appreciating currency rather than a depreciating one. I guess I could take Monero just out of respect for you too. Figure that one out. But
I'm very much of the school of thought of use whatever works for you, whatever seems most helpful for you in your own life, in your own business dealings, whatever's practical for you, use that, because that's what we want to happen, really. We want the market to coalesce around something that seems to be the most effective for the most people. And maybe it'll be the thing that I like, and maybe it won't. Maybe I'll get kind of overruled by the market. But what we want is people using what actually works for them.
yeah, I don't think that. I mean, I love Bitcoin. I think it is going to be the like payments basically the layer one solution. I don't think it's going to scale to an entire global population that's eventually going to need uh, basically cryptocurrencies, for lack of a better term. I think most cryptocurrencies out there are just pyramid schemes, plain and simple. They're pump and dumps. That's the way they operate in the market is just ugly. But there are going to be solutions that aren't just built on Bitcoin. I think there might be a Monero solution out there on and banks settle in Bitcoin. I still want to own that because I think that's going to be the most valuable asset. But it doesn't mean Monero. It doesn't mean they both can't win. That's the beautiful thing about the market is it allows for multiple solutions for different use cases.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I took from Michael Malice that I thought was really helpful is him saying, define your win condition. So what does it mean for your thing to win? I think for me, Monero, for that to be a win for me, all it means is that I can use it and I can transact privately with all the people I care to transact with. And, the
Yeah.
world doesn't have to adopt it for me to get that benefit. I don't need the whole world to agree with me in order for me to win.
Yeah, and the world won't agree with you. And there's going to be different problems in different countries and different solutions in different countries, different parts of the world. I saw today. I don't know if you saw this. I think it was Nigeria just banned all crypto exchanges because their currency is just flatlining, and they're doing everything they can to save it as people abandon it. So, I mean, there's going to be, I think, in that case, actually, Monero is a great option because they're coming after you, right? When the government's really hunting you, you want the maximum possible privacy and security. So, in that case, having everything available to see on the blockchain is not the ideal solution. So yeah, I can definitely see the use cases for Monero in situations like that.
I'm definitely aware of both Bitcoin and Monero people in Nigeria. So hopefully they're making hay and getting people involved. But that's great. But there are simple ways I think to start accepting Bitcoin and Monero. So one that I like is so there's a company that I think the company is called Now Payments, but they have an exchange called Change Now and some other sort of related crypto things. But they have essentially a payment gateway. So it's like a replacement for PayPal or Stripe or something like that that lets you accept any cryptocurrency, just about, hundreds, I'm sure, of options, and they will just receive it and exchange it either into Bitcoin or into your local fiat or whatever you want to receive. They will take a payment from someone, exchange it at the market rate, and then pay you in whatever you prefer to receive. So you can kind of say, yeah, I accept everything under the sun, and you don't have to worry about converting it. It just shows up in your account or your crypto wallet as whatever you prefer to receive, which I think is a great service. I think the transaction fees on it are like 1.5% or something, which I think that's competitive compared to like Stripe or PayPal. So I think that's a great option. Like I would love to see something like that. I don't know if there is like a plug-in system for Thrivecart, but that is where I'd start if I was going to build
Yeah,
something for Thrivecart. That's what I'd do.
there's not, but you can put custom HTML on a Thrivecart page. which, I've done for different things. Like in my coaching program, I have if you're not ready to buy, you need to talk, click here to book a 15-minute call with me. And that goes to my booking software. And so I found there's a site called, I was just looking it up. It's cryptocurrencycheckout.com. And it's just literally totally free. They let you put an HTML, hook it up to your wallet. You can run your own node if you want and make it really secure, but you can just hook it up to your own wallet and it accepts, you check which you want to accept. You have to go line by line, I think. You can have an HTML. It doesn't do the like, you select your currency or you select a price or whatever, it automatically fills it in. It's one, you have to actually manually go in the HTML and fix the price or fix the cart item. Um, but once it's there, so if I have my coaching, I could put the coaching price or the monthly price in and just put that HTML hard coded link in there that'll take you to that gateway. And then it passes basically the transaction ID that they then have to email you to confirm the purchase. Like it's not a clean, beautifully scalable solution, but it's better than what I got of an email me and I'll figure it out type situation.
Yeah, it's a start. It's like I once looked at doing crypto payments for people to buy a book off me. I was selling a book for fiat on Gumroad, I sort of worked out I chose not to do it in the end to try and I was going to just say to people, look, if you pay me via crypto, then I'll just give you like 100% discount code to download from my Gumroad. And I sort of realized the problem with that is that whether you like Gumroad or not, I have mixed feelings about it. But by doing that, they're not getting any cut of the revenue. And that's kind of their whole business model, right? They provide hosting and infrastructure for you to put a product out there to sell, and they get a small percentage each time you make a sale. And I think, well, if I'm just giving people 100% discounts, they're getting nothing. And so that's actually, I don't feel good about doing that to them in a business relationship.
If they paid you in a crypto, why wouldn't you just send them the book directly instead of sending them to a discount code?
In this case, it's because I wanted them on my email list. I could have
Okay,
done that all manually, but it was just nice to be able to like, here's the link, and you'll automatically get on my list and hooked up to all the other stuff.
sure. Yeah,
Um,
I with Thrivecart, I don't worry about it.
I found other ways to do it. Yeah,
Thrivecart's great because it has a one-time lifetime. So you pay, I think it's $5.95 or something, and you get lifetime access to the software, which is great compared to some of those other things. Now I have a Stripe attached to that and PayPal attached to that. Unfortunately, I wish I could get rid of PayPal, but too many people use it. So I pay Stripe transaction fees, but the Thrivecart thing is just a one-time fee, which is I like that. Now I know we're starting a SaaS, so that's
yeah.
kind of counter to what we want to do, but it's a great thing. But so I don't feel bad about putting my own HTML links in there, right? They already got all the money they're going to get out of me, so it's all fair there.
So I've thought this through. There, I think there is a time and a place for lifetime deals on SaaS, and a time and a place where it doesn't work. So there was a SaaS guy. Uh, I'm trying to think what the product was called now. The guy had a YouTube channel called Crypto Stackers, and he basically he spent probably 2 years doing video after video after video of just teaching people technical analysis and how to read charts, and these are the trades I'm doing in sort of different cryptos and stuff. He was just a crypto trader, and then he launched this SaaS product that was basically all his fancy charting tools. Like, you need to know some things about what is a simple moving average and standard deviations and all this kind of stuff. He took his kind of favorite, most common charting tools and just made them really, really easy to use. So it was just one button and the lines appear on the chart of where he would tend to want to buy and sell. And that's kind of all it was. It was just really, really simplified charting tools. And I think you could pay a monthly fee, or you could pay, it was something like $1,000 for lifetime. And I think he had like a thousand people or something buy the lifetime deal. So that's just $1 million out of the launch. And I thought that was 2 years well spent making videos. There's $1 million
Yeah,
at the end of it. But that's a SaaS product that he doesn't have to store any data. He doesn't have really a lot of ongoing fees. It scales to as many people as you want, because he doesn't. The marginal cost of adding an extra person to that is basically zero. Where by contrast, if you're like Dropbox or Netflix, and Dropbox, you have to actually provide people storage space. If you're Netflix, you actually have to provide people bandwidth to download these movies and things.
right.
And so that has ongoing costs. It doesn't make sense for that to be a lifetime deal, because you really can't predict how long someone's going to keep using it for. And they might use it way more than the lifetime deal you made with them. So it depends on the marginal cost of adding a user, I think, where the lifetime deals make sense.
I think, yeah, and it's interesting because it's not just with software that you can do the lifetime deal versus the monthly. So I have for my course Breaking Free, the freelancing course. In the initial round, I gave people lifetime access to the community membership site, and my plan was just to keep doing that and keep selling the course. But I've been convinced by a couple people recommending it to me, and I knew this made financial sense. I really need to start offering that as an upsell because it's to keep going in there and doing the, if I want to do the live Q&As and all that stuff, it's eventually Breaking Free will stop selling. It'll just, courses after 4 or 5 years get outdated. Um, so I need to have some type of incentive to stay in there. So I'm gonna, obviously the people that bought already are grandfathered in for life. I sold it that way, but moving forward, especially because I have a new front end coming out for the freelancing product, a much cheaper version that just has a little bit less video. Basically, it's the first module is going to be a new front end product. I need to sell. I'm going to sell it cheap. I think I'm going to go $19 a month, like a lower end community of freelancers. But there's got to be some money coming in to make it viable. But I'm not. I don't regret actually giving it away to the first 200 people or whatever that got lifetime access. It seeds a nice community in there. There's already some people in, and yeah, I don't know. It's one of those you got to consider where you're at or where you are, where you're at. Such a white trash saying. um, but you have to consider the situation you're in. It does make sense sometimes to give away a bit to get things started. Again, that's one of those scalable versus not. It's not scalable to give lifetime access, but it is necessary or beneficial sometimes in the early stages.
So I heard two excellent things that don't scale stories this week, back to back, which just reminded me that this is actually how people have been successful, is just by being scrappy and doing what works in the moment and not worrying too much about what might happen later until it happens. So the first one was Facebook. I thought this was brilliant. I was listening to a guy talk about doing a startup in the same kind of period of time when Facebook was launching just on a few university campuses. So he was actually in that time, there wasn't the cloud, that wasn't a thing. If you wanted to have a SaaS product, you had to go and rack a physical server in a data center somewhere, and if it crashed, you had to go physically down there in your car and reboot it. So he was racking a server, and he could see labels on the neighbor servers, the other people who had put servers next to his in the data center. And he saw these ones that were labeled, it was labeled like harvard.thefacebook.com, and realized, oh, that's that thing I've heard of that's been starting up. And as he kept going back there to do maintenance and whatever, he saw more servers appearing that said, Harvard.thefacebook, Stanford.thefacebook.com, whatever university. And became apparent to him that the way that they were scaling up was literally adding a new physical server for each university campus. And they didn't talk to each other. So you couldn't add a friend from a different university. It was only your one university that was on that server, on that instance. And all the engineering work to make Facebook a global thing where you can be friends with anyone came later. It was just,
That's funny.
we have 20 servers for 20 campuses, and that'll do for now. So I thought that's brilliant. They just skip all the engineering work for a global network. The other amazing one I thought was MySpace. That so Friendster, apparently, when that was a thing, if anyone remembers that, they had this thing where they would show, here are the people who are your friends in your immediate network, and then here are all the people in your extended network that are 2 degrees separated from you. So you're not friends with them, but they're a friend of a friend. And it would, each time you load the page, it would try to calculate and you go through the database and figure out who's friends of friends that you're not linked to, and show you a number, how many of those there are. And that was really cool to see. Oh, like I kind of know, in a way, this many people because I know people who know them. Friendster was calculating all that on the fly, and it was really computationally intensive and difficult to figure out at scale. MySpace had that feature, but literally the way they implemented that feature was just said, okay, friends, these are the people you're directly linked to, and everyone else that you looked up was in your extended network.
Yep.
No calculation. That's just, it's hard coded on the page. This person's in your extended network. They're friends of a friend of a friend of someone.
It's a solution. It gets you there.
Exactly. Got them where they needed to be for the time. And so I think that's what I've been kind of thinking through for our startup business is, what do we need
It,
right now?
so I'm interviewing when this comes out. Technically I'm interviewing him tomorrow. Matt McWilliams. He's the affiliate guy. And so I'm just going through his book again, Turn Your Passions into Profits. And one of the great points he makes is early on when you're starting your email list, go hand by hand and personally invite your friends or anybody that might be interested in that topic. Go to a forum that you've been active in and literally direct message everybody. And that's how you get your first 100, 200, 300 people. And that seed really can start to grow into a list of thousands of people over time. But you do not want to be doing that when you have 1,000, 2,000 people on your list. But that is that you have to get things started. There's nothing more important in business than momentum, I don't think. Like a good idea and then the momentum to carry it forward. And when you're starting something from a dead standstill, from nothing, it takes the most effort. But once you have anything moving, you got customers, you have motivation at that point, you have revenue rolling in, you have word of mouth, you're getting feedback. You need to really step on the gas and push that momentum. But again, you don't want to build a boulder so big you can't get it started moving in the first place. So whatever you can do to get things started is just critical in the beginning of businesses. So yeah, I love all these like not scalable strategies to companies that did eventually scale. I mean, Friendster and MySpace are gone, but it is a viable solution that every business can go through.
Yeah, so it's definitely a thing. Start with things that don't scale and be prepared to change them later. That is how people seem to be successful in practice. Is do whatever works for now and be scrappy about it. Think laterally about it. Don't assume that everything has to work in a way that it will always work. It can work for what we need to deal with today. You can be very kind of short term minded, high time preference, if you will, just to get the business off the ground. I'm really keen to hear that chat with Matt McWilliams. I'm a Matt McWilliams fan. I was
Oh yeah.
before pivoting into doing the software startup we're doing now. I read Passions into Profits, and I was looking at starting a couple of lists of my own just to see what worked. And I was looking at building software and helping people start lists in kind of his model. So I was big into Matt McWilliams stuff, and yeah, we'll definitely look forward to hearing all that.
All
That
right.
Reach My
I'll
Tribe
tell
thing
him
we
you
talked
said
about,
hi.
that was going to be, if you want
Yeah.
to do Matt McWilliams' model, use Reach My Tribe. That was kind of what I was going to build. Yeah, seems
Very
like a real
cool.
cool guy. Though I've never spoken to him.
The other thing that we've been talking about recently, this was a whole conversation this week because we're finally actually like getting our LLC off the ground and opening bank accounts, and we have that need with where we are. Was whether or not, given everything happening in the U.S., if it's worth opening an LLC, a new business inside the U.S. You sent me a very terrifying article on a tax structure that it likely won't pass, but would basically make it prohibitively expensive to run any type of tech company with any scale of programming in the United States. We just saw Trump get his pantsuit off for no reason that like for basic real estate practices. Now, I happen to think real estate at that scale is a dirty industry, but it's the game was he was playing the game the way everybody played the game and got picked on for it. Like if that judgment held up to every real estate person in New York, there would be no more real estate people in New York, which actually might be the case. They might all have to leave. Then there was the Elon case because our original idea was to open the LLC in Delaware. It's a lot of tax advantage reasons. It's right next door to me. Um, but then the Elon thing, where again, we're not going to have Elon Musk compensation problems, but the fact that a Delaware can decide that that was an unfair, payment is insane. When 80% of the board agreed on it, they're just overruling corporate structure, which it just seems like the more, um, I don't know, authoritarian these states get, the more dangerous it seems to do business in the United States. So we were looking basically all over the world for different places to start a business, and we ran into a bunch of problems. Do you want to outline some of those?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm trying to think. The first one that jumped to my mind was Singapore, because for me that's actually fairly local, kind of like Delaware is for you. That's a near neighbor for me. It's English speaking. It's got low flat tax rate. The corporate taxes are pretty, yeah, actually not that high. I think they had pretty good rules about pass through. I don't remember exactly what the rules were, but it was, so if you want to pay dividends to yourself as a foreign holder of a Singapore company, that's not taxed. You pay taxes on it in your home country. It was very favorable. And I have Singaporean friends here, and it's somewhat familiar territory. I know there's a lot of gold bugs around in Singapore, so there's some amount of hard money culture. So all these kind of things painted it for me as a very positive jurisdiction. Uh, Getting a Singapore company entity didn't seem like it took all that much paperwork and effort. It was relatively cheap. It was $300 or something, nothing dramatic. But the key thing that made me kind of pause, you go, actually, that's a problem, is that we had to have one director of the company on paper who actually was resident in Singapore. I don't think they had to be a citizen, but they did have to live there. And so that's, I don't have any particular desire to live in Singapore. I don't dislike it as a country, but I don't intend to move there either. And so that's a bit of a showstopper.
We talked about Panama as well. Panama it's an interesting. That's actually when I threw this out to Tane. That's what his first gut was. Check out Panama. One of the things we discovered was that the payment processing is not friendly to out of country people. So basically, if you're going to do payment processing for a SaaS company, there's very few options in the United States that are easy, clean, integrate with everything. Stripe is one of them. 2Checkout's another, but they don't like if you have basically they like operating inside the United States. You can operate in these other countries, but you need physical address. You need like proof of residency, all these things. They don't want you just offshoring, which I'm sure is actually probably because they work so closely with banks that the banks and the governments do not like when you just easily move your business overseas, because they know what they're doing to us. Like they know what they're doing to the country. They need to keep as much money captured inside the borders as they can, which is going to get increasingly hard for them to do. But it is an interesting like hiccup. So I think our compromise is basically we're going to stick with a U.S. based company, at least to start. Maybe have the holding company overseas at some point. Um, but we'll do it in a red state where we're less likely to get smacked down arbitrarily, because it is coming for everybody. If they start smacking, I know he's like the president, and then they're basically going after billionaires is what making the headlines. But when they do it to billionaires, they're proving they can do it to anybody, because it won't make the news if our little company gets smacked down by Delaware or New York or wherever. We'd never be stupid enough to start in New York, but it wouldn't make headlines if even if we scale to a couple $1 million, $10 million, that's just not big enough to make any kind of headlines or get any kind of attention. So if they can do it to a billionaire, they can do it to anybody. And it's really kind of terrifying where they're going with this stuff.
Yeah, so I think I've known for a while that the big thing with Silicon Valley startups and things was to have their LLC in Delaware. I've never entirely understood why that was. I assume it's low corporate tax, but I also assume there's some other reason, because there's multiple other states in the US that have no state corporate tax and it's very cheap. Like, why Delaware specifically? I assume there was some historic legal rulings that were favorable or something like that.
There's tax, and there's friendly litigation, mediation for business settlements in Delaware. So it used to be a very business friendly state. There's a lot of banks that are headquartered there, just because of these regulations. So I mean, some crazy number of the percentage of companies in the United States are headquartered in Delaware. They're like a enormous fraction of it compared to the size of the state, which is it's a speck on the map. It's a pass through state.
I
It's
understand there is
it's
some building that is officially the address for some crazy. It's the one address for thousands and thousands of corporations.
Yeah, my LLCs. I have a Delaware LLC that's probably in there somewhere. I have a registered agent. I have to go to a meeting or something once a year to keep things legal. But other than that, it's all just corporate structures that I don't understand. The tax laws are built for people that are way bigger than me, but I get to take advantage of them.
Yeah. So I have a friend here who's from the US, but who's a lawyer, who first put me onto the Mises Institute and some things like that. So he's a closet radical. But he was the one who suggested to me, if you want a US LLC, look at Wyoming, and he sent me a link to, like, here's a law firm that I like, that they do LLCs for people. That's what they do, and they'll be your agent of record, and the address can be at their law firm and all this kind of thing. It was super easy. It was cheap. It was quick. So I actually looked at forming what's called a proprietary limited company here in Australia, which is effectively our equivalent of an LLC. It was going to be thousands of dollars and way more paperwork. And why would I ever do that when I could have a US LLC for a couple of $100 and 20 minutes of my time to set up?
Yeah.
So I have a Wyoming LLC, and I have really found that process good. So if there's people out there looking for somewhere to form a little business for a startup, or for their, hold real estate or be their freelancing business or whatever, definitely worth a look at Wyoming, I think.
It's yes, they have really good privacy in Wyoming is one of the things. As what I've heard is people have to literally know you have an LLC there and know the address to be able to find it. It's not searchable like Pennsylvania LLCs. You could just Google my name and you'll find my Pennsylvania LLC. It's basically public record. They keep everything in Wyoming on paper in like filing cabinets, so you have to know where to go to be able to look it up. Now, technically, it is public if you can subpoena it, and it's all out there. But it's one of those it's asset protection things. Is when like if you get in an accident or something, and you have a shark lawyer that's looking, are you worth suing? They have a really hard time finding any assets in a Wyoming LLC. So it's people that are looking to protect like multimillionaires that don't want to get arbitrarily sued tend to have assets stored away in Wyoming type LLCs. So yeah, it's a popular place to have them, and it's I don't know what are the tax rates like in Wyoming based companies. Do you know state taxes there?
Zero, pretty sure. There was some annual fee for filing everything, but it was like $50.
Right, that's
It's
every state.
yeah,
Yeah.
pretty trivial. Uh, yeah, I think I looked at several others. I think it was a while ago now, but I think Wyoming was the cheapest thing I found. And yeah, just the attorney I did it through, they had an online portal where you can just fill out all the details and they'll handle it for you. And it was just super white glove. I didn't have to do a whole lot of
Uh,
stuff myself.
the only thing we need to consider is if we want an LLC, we need a bank based in Wyoming. I think if you have that, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
I have
most
a
national banks would have a branch in Wyoming, so I don't imagine that's that big of a problem.
Yeah. So I have I it's not I don't know if it's technically I think it's technically not a bank. So there's a thing called Mercury that is basically banking services for online startups, SaaS companies, that sort of thing. They sort of target startups as their customer base and provide banking services. And so it was Choice Limited is the name of their FDIC approved insured banking partner who provides bank accounts. But I'm signed up to that through Mercury. So I have a USD bank account through Mercury that's tied to my Wyoming LLC. But I never had to
Nice.
physically go to Wyoming. I don't know what banks are in Wyoming. I didn't have to know any of that. I could just sign up with
Well,
Mercury and
yeah,
here's my LLC. And
you're right. That's like an outdated rule since every bank is national now. So yeah, the online stuff probably makes just as much sense as anything else. So one of the other things we talked a little bit about it, but was actually you know, accepting how what are the technical aspects to accepting cryptos, Bitcoin and Monero specifically, in like our scalable business? Like, do you know that it's possible? I talked to Bobby Shell a couple weeks ago, and he works at Voltage, which integrates kind of scalable Lightning Network nodes for businesses. But there's got to be we have subscription type payments. So how is this? I don't know. What are the technical hurdles we're gonna have to deal with?
subscription payments in cryptocurrency in general are difficult. It's something that I've sort of looked at solving before. I did up a plan basically for software setup to do that. It's not something I ever got around to implementing. It was just kind of a shower thought idea. Uh, but pretty much the difficulty is that in in crypto, all payments are push payments. I'm going to pay you. I trigger the payment. That's how it always
Right.
works because I have the cryptographic keys to sign a transaction to send to you. And in fiat land, there's a lot more things that are pool payments. So I give you some kind of details, a direct debit agreement with the bank, or my credit card number, and you can trigger a payment from me using those details. Which it was sort of a thing that needed to be done for practical reasons. And I think people who want to run subscription businesses like SaaS companies, but also you want to be in Coffee of the Month Club. They want to be able to bill you not interactively. Netflix wants to be able to bill you without you having to actually do anything. Because among other
Right.
things, it stops you from just not paying on time and them constantly having to chase people, even though those people want to stay signed up. So like some people would
Mhm.
not pay because they just don't want to pay anymore, and eventually the service will get cut off. But some people
Right.
will just they're busy, they won't get around to it. You constantly be having to chase people for their $7 subscription fee. It doesn't
Well,
make
and
sense.
imagine the customer service headaches of having to shut down access to a service because somebody didn't pay, especially if it's a business related service. Like if we're dealing with freelancers that are their entire client project could be based inside of our product, and if they don't pay and they get locked out, are they locked out of all their work? Like that actually, that's something you'd have to really think about. Like we'd have to warn them several times in advance. Like if you're not paying, you got to download this all now. Get it out of here. Like it could be a customer service nightmare if you can't automatically bill.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely could. And I work at a SaaS company now, and we've had people not pay, and we have a system where their data gets archived, so it's still all there, and
Yeah.
they could access it, but they can't add anything new to it.
Right.
and so the archive data is there. And I think after there's a grace period where they can obtain it, and after that, it's kind of stored away in deep storage. And if they can pay us to retrieve it all, but that's after they've had grace period.
Yeah.
So just if they stop paying and then 2 years later they get audited by the taxman or whatever, and they need that data, well, they can pay us a fee and we'll retrieve it out of deep storage. So there's those options are there. But yeah, there needs to be a way to do pool payments. Now there are some cryptocurrencies that have built very clever cryptographic schemes for that. Uh, trying to, I'm not going to remember all the details off the top of my head. I know it exists on Bitcoin Cash. Uh, there has been some kind of, I don't even remember exactly what the name of it was, but some clever folks came up with cryptographic schemes where you could basically authorize someone. You could sign a particular message that would enable someone to build a transaction that would come from a particular wallet of yours, but they wouldn't have to know in advance the exact UTXOs that it would come from. And yeah, it was. I didn't look deeply into the cryptographic elements of the way it worked, but apparently it worked. So there's people have worked on cryptographic schemes for doing pool payments in crypto land. It it exists, but it's pretty bleeding edge. It's not commonly adopted, so I don't expect that to be something that's just common in the next 6 to 12 months. It'll be a while yet. That's something where so something I'm very critical of Bitcoin about is that there's a lot of custodial services where you don't hold your own keys. Someone else is really holding your Bitcoin and just managing it for you. But one of the advantages of that is that you can do things like, run pool payments and things because
Mhm.
it's, there is no cryptographic security. Someone else has your Bitcoin. That's that's a problem. If they decide they don't like the look of you or your politics are wrong, whatever, they could freeze it. That's the downside. The upside is that there's a bunch of things that are very convenient that are much easier to build when you don't have to work around some of those cryptographic security things that are part of the protocol because you're operating outside of the Bitcoin protocol anyway.
Yeah, it's such an interesting conundrum. So I think for us, just a technical solution would be if you're going to pay in a crypto, you got to do an annual subscription. Like that's the only way it's viable because then you only have to worry about one rebill a year, where they have to actually go through and say yes, agree to this, and so you can start rebilling a month ahead of time, right? Start that warning process, make sure that that thing goes through, and you've made a big enough sale on a year long subscription that your business is not fluctuating too much on or people not renewing, and you have enough of a runway where if it's a monthly subscription, it's hard to give a whole month runway, right? You don't want to start the rebuild process day 2, whereas you can do that on a year long service. But I think the custodial stuff is fascinating because the more I'm sure you're aware of like the WEF, you'll own nothing and be happy stuff going on. It's amazing how deep that goes, uh, because people really own almost nothing, right? Most people have a mortgage on their house, so the bank owns their house. This one I've just been deep diving into because Chris Martenson brought up a book on one of his podcasts the other day. Basically, you don't own your stocks. The vast majority of people don't own their own stocks. And Jim Rickards kind of tried to shoot this down. I know Jim; he's a nice guy. I worked with him. He's wrong. You look into it. You absolutely do not own your stocks. They can absolutely rug pull you. And he's trying to say, well, that's government confiscation. And yeah, when have the courts stopped anything illegal recently? You don't own your stocks. They're gonna pull them. It's crazy to have too much money in the stock market right now, especially or mutual funds or your 401ks. You don't own anything in your 401k. You have a claim on that pool on a pro rata share. You're going to get 90% of your value yanked from you. The junk bonds have higher priority than you. It's insane. So,
The
like
junk
custodial,
bonds.
it's crazy. You are the lowest person on that totem pole to get any money when those things, and there's no actual guarantee they have. I know there's some protocols that they're supposed to verify that they have all the stock they say they do, and it's supposed to be tagged to you. I don't trust any of that stuff. You just look at the way these companies operate. They do not care. They do not care about you. They are eager to rug pull you. It's going to make them a fortune. So,
Yeah.
so owning your own stuff is incredibly important right now. Like if you have your own property, like I bought this house outright. I have the title printed out in a safe. Like I probably need to put it in extra security because like I need to prove that I own it. You go back to 2008, there were a lot of people in America. The bank repossessed their house that they had fully paid off because there was some paperwork mix up somewhere that the bank just came in, the sheriffs kicked them out. There's multiple stories of that, and not everybody got their house back. It's insane. You really need to have proof of what you own, and it needs to be in your control, or the future is going to get really ugly for you really fast.
Yeah, so there's a guy named Patrick Byrne who ran something called Overstock, which is apparently was a big company that I hadn't heard of before hearing this story. But one of the things he was doing was in the developing world, he was setting up kind of blockchain stuff that would let people have title to property that's recorded on this immutable ledger. And I actually thought that's a really good use case. I totally see the benefit of that. It's a debate in kind of the Bitcoin scene at the moment about just storing arbitrary data in the Bitcoin blockchain, and is that okay? Do we consider that spam? Is that a legitimate use case? But I think for things like real estate title, where it's not that liquid, it doesn't change hands all that often, and it's high value, and it's open to being repossessed. I think that's one of those things that really does make sense. I think to it's worth paying a high transaction fee to store a small amount of data proving that you have title to land on something like the Bitcoin blockchain. I totally see the case for that, because it means that no matter what burns down, no matter who steals your safe, there's so many redundant copies of that, and it's verifiable. Yeah, I had title to this. That I could definitely see being worthwhile.
Yeah, it makes title theft almost impossible if it's on a blockchain that's globally distributed. It's just you can't just have title fraud where because everybody would be able to look and say no, you didn't actually. That was that is a clearly fraudulent transaction you just pulled off. So it would save a lot of headaches. Obviously there's some legacy things that type of technology really helps out with.
Yes, this is one of those cases where the developing world might do a really interesting leapfrog, where there's a whole lot of bureaucracy that exists in these kind of legacy Western countries that totally made sense for the time and was a good step forward for the time. But
Hmm.
some of these developing countries are just going to skip over that entirely and go straight to all our land titles are now on the blockchain, easily searchable, easily identifiable. The court cases are very quick and simple. What's the blockchain say? Yep, it's yours. And it can be that simple. Just like they've pretty much jumped straight over laying all this landline phone infrastructure and just jumped straight to mobile phones, cell phones. And it's been a huge boon for the local economies to have suddenly huge amounts of network access.
I'm very curious because it seems like there's going to be two classes of people in the not too distant future, like people who own stuff and people who don't. It's a very like weirdly bifurcated society. Am I wrong about that? Like we've been talking a lot about like I think they're going to do mass confiscations. It seems the way the system's set up, it seems primed for it. Like they're saying they want to do it. They have the technical ability to do it. It's outlandish and unprecedented and like straight up evil, but because they want to do it and they have the technical ability to do it, to me, it seems like a matter of time before they at least try to just take everything from almost everyone. And that's going to leave ownership class and not ownership class. So there's going to be people that have assets and there's going to be people that are trying to figure it out. Like, I don't like they're going to, that's how you get a CBDC. Like, I know I sound crazy and conspiratorial when I go down this route, but why are these systems in place if they never plan on using them?
I definitely think it's going to happen. The main question for my mind is how they're going to sell it to the public, because it needs to be propagandized in such a way that enough people will either accept it as legitimate or accept it as inevitable, even if they don't like it. So yeah, how they're going to message that to the public so that they don't get a revolt, I think that'll be the difficult line to walk. But yeah, as you say, they want to do it and they have the means to do it. It's just whether they can sell it without getting guillotined. Uh, so the equivalent of a 401k in Australia is called superannuation, and so it's kind of a forced retirement saving plan. And so if you don't do anything, if you're just a kid starting out and don't really know anything about finance, you'll just get hooked up with some superannuation account from some major provider where I forget, I think it's 9.5% of each of your paychecks goes to them, and they invest it in some diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds or whatever. And the idea is that that's put away, and you get that tax free when you retire. So that's kind of the system here. But I've been looking at that for quite a few years now, going, I don't expect that to be there when I retire. When I'm kind of retirement age, that's what, maybe 30, 40 years away. How likely is it really that in that time, no government got into such a financial pickles that they just went, you know what? That's all sitting there. No, the people who own it aren't allowed to access it by our. We could just take a slice of that. That could just be ours. Like, they might not try to take it all, but if you've got,
And
they'll probably say, if you're one of the rich people, you've got more than X amount in there. We're going to just take 20% off the top. That's how we'll get out of this pickle. And so I fully expect that whatever I've got in there won't be there. People have what's called self-managed super funds, So rather than having some big company run your superannuation for you, you can self-manage, but it's costly. You have to file all these extra tax forms and stuff as if you're a large corporation running a superannuation business. And so the cheapest way I've found to do self-managed super so far is about $1,800 a year, which, that's depending what you're earning. That could be a large chunk of what's going in there. That could be 10% of what you're
Yeah.
putting in there. This kind of thing. And yeah, it's not cost effective for everyone to do that. So I'm currently doing it with that cheapest option I found, and that cheapest option is cheap because it pretty much just gives me automated access to buy Australian stocks or US stocks, um, which is, it's better. My self managed super is way outperforming the default super I had before. So I'm up 20 plus percent on the last year on my self managed super versus the account I had before is down. It's largely because
The
largely from I bought a whole lot of you know custodial Bitcoin Cash. I think I did 100% on buying the Grayscale Bitcoin Cash Trust. But that's I don't like custodial, but I did it in super because that's the option I had.
Well, if you're held over barrel there, right? You don't have any option but to use that system, and therefore, if you're forcing your money in there, yeah, you still want to touch something that's going to be growing versus the rest of this stock market that's basically propped up by five stocks. Like the entire U.S. market is propped up by a very limited number of companies right now. It's actually really ugly over here.
So this was one of my big red pills from Robert Kiyosaki. There were two really. One, he said, "I don't like stocks. If you can print it, I don't want it." And that was me kind of realizing, yeah, actually, if you have a slip of paper that says you have X% of a company, what do you really have? Like, it's not that tangible. And, if you have it through a brokerage, you might not even technically own that. It's an
Right.
IOU. But even if you have the real slip of paper, is there some board of directors that can just kind of vote to dilute all your shares and this kind of thing? That's happened to me. I've had stock in a company that then issued a bunch more shares and diluted everybody. And I said, like, that was my hard lesson in, oh, that can happen. It matters.
Sure.
If you're just a
Uh,
tiny little stakeholder, you have no power.
if the business is operating well, you're betting that they won't be diluting. Like the fact that they were diluting their shares means they were in trouble. Like that's a desperation move to not go to zero. Like usually when you start massively diluting, and you're not a startup, it's because like you're in trouble. Like, and so you're owning a crappy stock anyway. So you were losing value no matter what they did. This was probably the least painful thing because the nice thing about in the ideal world where stocks operated like they did in the 1800s, the directors own way more stock than you. They do not want that share price to fall, right? They have an incentive. The company is aligned to make the stock price go up, which is why it's always been a good investment in a good company because there is no incentive to screw themselves over on those transactions. Um, Now, when you get into some of the weird incentives that are going on in the market today, where it's DEI and you're actually just going for the BlackRock cash, not the shareholder value, because that's what matters to you. It's hard to understate or overstate how much that's distorted the market. The stock market is totally fake right now. There's like I know people have been saying like the stock market is the longest lasting, most reliable growth mechanism ever in history. Is like it was up until the 80s, 90s, and now it's not what it was. It's entirely changed with the same facade. It's really kind of scary what's going on out there.
So this all true, and yet there's always the question to ask from Thomas Sowell: compared to what? So this morning I saw there's a particular kind of economic commentator in Australia who I follow, and because Australia has all these ties with China for economic reasons, we sort of follow stuff in China. Saying his Chinese correspondent basically told him this morning that people in China have been calling their brokers and saying, "I want to sell XYZ stock in China," and the broker had just been telling them no. The party has said no. There's some person from some CCP affiliated person within the company has blocked that from being a thing you're allowed to do.
Well, if you're communist, you don't own anything. Yeah, they can do that. That's the beauty of communism is.
So that's the thing. America maybe has a lot of problems, but then again, compared to what? So
So I would say if we're talking investment classes, obviously there's Bitcoin, which I've preached enough about. I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But one of the things, so I worked, yeah, I worked with Chris Martenson back when he was coming out with Crash Course and Peak Prosperity was a big thing, and he was all talking about peak oil and all those different things, which he's kind of becoming right about now, a decade and a half later, whatever it is. Um, But one of the things that he's actually gotten me re-looking at is gold and precious metals again. What his argument, which I think is probably right, is if the level of kind of chaos continues in the world, one of the things we're doing is cutting our own legs off with energy production. We are not producing energy anymore. And the only reason that gold and silver prices are they're going up a little bit, but they're relatively stable is because you keep mining more. If you run out of energy, one of the first things you're going to cut is precious metal mining, which means you all of a sudden have a huge spike in the limitedness of the supply of precious metals. So you could have a massive spike in gold and silver prices and other precious metals simply because we don't have the energy to dig up gold anymore. You need that energy for food production and transportation before anything else. So all these other energy use cases have to go down if you keep cutting. Like, we've cut off our natural gas. We're not drilling for oil. We don't have any efficient, clean, quote unquote, energy systems available, especially not that would power a mining operation. So it's really getting like, if we continue on the trajectory we're on, it's a very, very strong case for at least stocking up a little bit on some precious metals.
Yeah. So I am a little bit of a silver bug. I have one of my biggest stock holdings is Wheaton Precious Metals, which is it's a big silver company basically. Technically not a miner, but it's like kind of in that silver mining space, and it's done reasonably well for me. I intend to keep holding more of it, but I think silver has this really good set of industrial uses that, like, it is a monetary metal certainly, and I think, in a real dystopia where the internet goes out and whatever, I do think I'd want to have some silver coins. I think they'd be useful for barter. And yet, if you've ever actually tried doing commerce in silver coins, like, that was what really pushed me to go, no, 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 crypto is the future.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is going to outcompete precious metals for the monetary use case. It's really cumbersome dealing with precious metal coins because they're not divisible. It's really hard to make change. They're heavy. It's a pain. It made me see why paper money became a thing. And yeah, so
Oh yeah.
that kind of pushed me to go, okay, yeah, lean more into crypto and less into metals. Was actually trying to buy and sell some things with silver. It's not
Yeah.
convenient.
No, when you get there, you're going to have to do basically large transactions. Like, you're going to be buying a cow at a time, right? Or a pallet of bullets, or like a pallet of salt. It's not good for small, like, normal transactions. It becomes the same thing that basically Bitcoin's going to be for for big scale transactions or settling payments. I think, yeah, if you get to that level though, where the internet's out and there's like, you're way better off with salt and bullets. It's just the fact,
Mm,
like, something that's
pretty
actually
much.
more practical, because the industrial uses are kind of gone at that point. And
Yeah.
again, that is dystopia. I don't think the world gets to that place. I think there's too much holding everything else together at this point. Not that it doesn't get ugly, but I don't think we go to Mad Max. I don't know. I don't see it happening. Although I have the bullets for it. If it happens, I'll outlast a lot of people.
I think I will have to do a lot of things differently if we get to that. It's not going to just be, I just have to choose silver instead of crypto. It's going to be radical lifestyle changes. Uh, but yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
Um,
that's my thoughts on that. I think there's enough good uses for silver that I think silver can be plenty lucrative without dominating in the money space. So I'm not too worried about that. But I fully expect Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general to be out competing precious metals for the monetary use case.
Absolutely. So if we do get to that dystopia, or somewhere, not we don't even have to get to that dystopia. We're already in the policeless state dystopia, right? There's kind of anarcho tyranny going on in a lot of cities. I know you had a story about somebody down in Australia where the police just aren't helping. Like, I know that was a topic you wanted to bring up. Do you want to get into that at all?
Yeah, sure. It's just something I saw in the last day. There's a guy named Rook Shan who's, I think, I want to say Indian or Bangladeshi descent. I forget exactly, but he's an Australian guy in Melbourne, and he's like independent journalist. So he's mates with a guy named Avi Yemeni, he is ex-IDF. He's a Jewish guy. He's very pro-Israel. Whatever you think of that, that's just the side they're on. But he went down to cover a kind of pro-Palestine march in Melbourne so there was like a local council having a meeting. So that's like a suburb. It's maybe a few tens of thousands of people that they're the local government for. Not big, and they had on their agenda to pass some big resolution condemning Israel or whatever. Like, sure, maybe you're happy to see Israel condemned. That's fine, but the point is, it's a local government. It's really no one cares about their opinion.
Right.
The Israeli government's not going to go, oh, we've been condemned by a small local government in a suburb of Melbourne. We're going to change our ways. It's obviously for kind of virtue signal. Anyway, Rook
Yeah.
Shan went down there to film some stuff, and people, pro-Palestine protesters, did what by law, like it's not a huge deal. He got a big chest bump. A guy kicked him. Like it happens on the schoolyard every day. It is assault. It is a crime, but he's not going to be in the hospital or anything like that. But what was really interesting is that this was done right in front of police. And so Rukshan's there going, that's assault. I want to press charges on that guy. It was that guy. You all saw it. I have it on video. And still the police did nothing. So wouldn't arrest the guy, wouldn't, help press charges, just told him, look, that's a fairly minor assault. So we're not going to do anything about it, basically. And what was really interesting in the YouTube comments, I think people rightly pointing out, if that guy had done that to one of the cops, he would already be in jail. Like if he had run up and chest bumped one of the cops and kicked the cops in the shins, he'd already be arrested. It's so there is this sort of two-tier
Yeah.
system. And of course, this is Melbourne, so right, these are the cops who are out body slamming people for not wearing masks and things during COVID. So it's the same people. And so you're kind of realizing, okay, like if just your politics determine whether you get help from the police or not. That is really the state of Victoria Police in the city of Melbourne at the moment. It's like it's our New York, basically. Uh,
That's pretty gross.
it is really, really gross. So just given that exists in the world, that's an example for me locally, but I'm sure there are many places around the world where for various reasons, like if you're just, you know, you're the brother-in-law of someone that pissed off the mayor or something in your town, for whatever reason, you might just know, look, the cops are not going to help me if something happens. And so what options do you have then? I've just been thinking through, like, what are your other options? Like, obviously there's some countries where you can own a gun and some where you can't, and you probably want to have a gun and know how to use it. That's something worth doing. But outside of that, like, what's it like trying to hire private security? What's it like trying to set up a bunch of cameras around your home? Is that worth doing? Do you want to coordinate with your neighbors to set up a neighborhood watch? It's not something I've really had to think about. Like, what are the realistic alternatives if you're not going to get any help from the police in an emergency?
Well, it's actually there's kind of two questions in there that are slightly different. There's the question of what if the police are just useless, which is kind of where you were going with that description of, like, I don't know, community watch, home security. This is what I have out in the mountains. Is the closest police station is going to be a half-hour drive to me. Like, I'm not getting help if I need it in an emergency, which is why everybody out here, watches each other's backs, and everybody has guns, and it's like, also, nobody's stupid enough to come try and break into houses out here unless they're on some type of drug, which is not the rarest thing in America right now. And so, look, I think you can band together and have private security. There's actually a fascinating. I was on a call for my X-Plan community last night, and one of the guys in there was talking about a place in Mexico that is an entirely private city. It's owned. It was founded by the CEO of it's a multi-billion-dollar company, but it's only in Mexico. It's some store brand that's only in Mexico. But he basically made a giant gated community, and it's politicians live in there, and basically a lot of very wealthy Mexicans live there, and nobody else can get in. Entirely private security, giant 10-foot walls, barbed wire around them, but inside it's gorgeous. So, and that's Mexico's kind of one of those states that they have a functional government. They have some crime problems, obviously, with cartels, but the rest of the country is basically in a form of, I would call it, productive anarchy. They have cooperatives and they watch each other's backs. Even if you go to poor neighborhoods or poorer neighborhoods, I don't want to say poor, but like lower middle class neighborhoods in Mexico, people leave their bikes on the street in some towns because if anybody sees you stealing a bike, all the neighbors will beat the crap out of you. Like, they protect each other. They watch out for their own. I think community's natural form. That's how security was developed, like throughout human history. The deferring to a police state is a very kind of new development starting in the Middle Ages, basically. But in America, much newer than that. It used to be, vigilante bands and all that. The scarier question is, what do you do when the police are your enemy? Like, how do you
Mm.
actually fight that? Because that's the anarcho-tyranny that you have in, when the police are body slamming you for walking without a mask, but then won't stop somebody from beating you up if you're, on the wrong side of a political issue. So, I happen to have some serious problems with what Israel's doing. And I happen to think that guy should just suck it up if you got chest bumped. Dude, come on. But you're right. The cops would not take that for themselves. There's no chance that that person would have their teeth left. I don't know. That's maybe American cops, but I don't. That's a much trickier problem. I think the only way to deal with tyrannical police is to leave. You cannot, like, if they're coming after you, if they're making it impossible to defend yourself and you are their victim, there's nothing to do but get out of their way. Like, that will collapse eventually because they'll lose all popular support, but you can't really. What are you going to do? Band together and have a war with the cops? Like, what is it? 5 points in that New York City, old days. What was that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and you know what? Oh no,
Matt
what is it?
Damon, The Departed.
No. Back at the 5 points back in the day in New York, Gangs in New York.
Haven't seen it.
Daniel Day-Lewis, and yeah, I don't know.
I had heard people saying, I think during about the Nazis coming for Jews under the floorboards in World War II. I forget exactly what was said, but it was something to the effect of, what we should have done is just, instead of fearing for our own lives, we should have just started attacking people that came to the door looking to haul people off to boxcars. We should have just said, a few of us are going to die in the process of fighting back, but if we don't do it, we're all going to die. So let's just do it. And it should have been known by the, technically, are they police, army, whatever they were, the SS coming door to door. Like, they should
Yeah.
have known when they went out at night, not all of us are going to come home because we're going to get attacked. And just that would have been what it took to stop them. They should have known every night they went out to try and find people to take away that they were probably not all going to come home. Someone was going to get killed.
But didn't
And
they take the
I
guns? They took the guns before they started doing that, right? Before that
yeah,
door-to-door stuff happened, they already confiscated the guns. So really, where it needs to start is, if you come for the guns, if you come for our means of self-defense, this is not
yeah,
political advice, people. I'm not saying to do this, but like, the most effective strategy in a theoretical world that we would never advocate for would be never let them take the guns, no matter what they try to do. Certainly don't
yeah,
voluntarily surrender them, because at
definitely.
that point, when you've disarmed yourself, you've already given up.
Certainly. And yet, if you're in the situation where you don't have those arms, the thing to do is to fight anyway and know that
Yeah.
sadly, you'll take some losses, but that's still better than the alternative. And I sort of thought about this, about Melbourne, because the police got so out of control during COVID. I thought, what if Melbourneites with no arms had risen up but they have cricket bats because cricket's big down there, and said, you know what, you come and arrest people that have done nothing wrong. Expect that you're going to get some kneecaps broken. Everyone's going to come out with their cricket bats and whack you in the knees. Expect that a lot of police will have their kneecaps busted. That might have been the, I don't want to say the better answer because I'm not a fan of violence, and yet it may have been less total net violence if that had been the popular thing.
I
And yet,
wonder
still, as you
how.
say, the better solution I think is just leave. So I recently was talking to a guy who's from a very small country town out the back of nowhere, but he had people who had arrived in town, new people he'd met who had come there from Melbourne, and he said, why'd you move all the way out here from big capital city? And they said, because there is one police officer in this town. There's the budget to pay him for 40 hours, and then he goes home. That's why we chose here. We didn't have jobs or anything. We thought we'll figure it out when we get there, but we're getting somewhere further away. And
I wonder.
that's rational.
I wonder the difference, though, between, if it would ever get to it in a culture, in a society where the cops knew that was a possibility. Because I got the impression that most people in Australia were, at least in the cities, were happy to comply. That if the one person tried to take out some shins with a bat, they would get punished so hard and they would be frowned upon by everybody else. It wouldn't be like they would start a revolution. It would be like, that weirdo just did what to the cops? Like, and it would just be an isolated incident that wouldn't scare the police at all.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. The police would have to be doing something much more extreme. Like, they would actually have to be going door to door and killing people, I think, for that kind of popular
Yeah.
uprising to take hold. Otherwise, people are just, people, fundamentally, most people are status, and they will side with the cops even when the cops are doing the wrong thing, because they. I think most people see it as, well, the alternative is complete chaos and is Mad Max, basically.
And this is the beauty of community and network, right? I have my cornerstones of liberty. It's why network is such. It literally is a cornerstone, because if you're not surrounded by people who share your values and see the world the way you do, you got to get away from the people that are anti your values, like the people that are literally trying to drag you down, to drag you into a dystopia that you don't want to live in. You shouldn't just sit there quietly and put up with them. You just need to get out and build your own network. And the internet makes that beautifully possible. The cryptos, Monero and Bitcoin, make it possible to build this society. We have the technological ability. You just have to get out there and start doing it. There's no excuses anymore. You have to start building a network of people who think like you and care about the same things you do, or you will get sucked down into the dirt and be a slave to these people.
Yeah. So I think you were saying about, like, the people who live around your area, they know the cops are far away, but everyone watches each other's back. It's the same here. Like, only in the last week or two, someone knocked on our door and said, "Hey, there's someone none of us know who's been just walking around the neighborhood and sort of looking funny at houses. We think they might be, don't know what the story is, but just something to watch out for." And it just reminded me that it's worth knowing your neighbors for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just if you're in a place where you don't know any of your neighbors, it's probably because you don't care to know them, and that's probably because for whatever reason you just you don't get along all that well. It's not a natural fit for a friendship, and probably it's worth moving somewhere where you like the people, because then you'll know your neighbors.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a guy in the Tom Woods mastermind that was talking. He's moving because of a network, because he's just, he's in well, he's in Virginia, and he's like, there's good parts of Virginia, and he likes his neighbors, but he has younger kids, and they're all older people. So even though he has, the land he likes and the house he likes, he's moving to Texas because there's communities there that he's religious, so there'll be a religious community around him that will share his kids' values, and they'll grow up around other people who think like them. And moving across the country to do this, it is that important in some cases to actually have to do that. Yeah, if you don't like your neighbors, why are they your neighbors?
Yeah, and so I'm not a Mormon, but if I was, why would I not live in Utah?
Yeah,
It's the obvious thing
um,
to do.
that's funny because this guy is Mormon, and there's the Mormon community in Texas that he's moving to. All right, Mr. Watts, we have been going for over an hour now. I think it's about time to wrap up. Is there any closing thoughts you have?
Uh, no, really. I'll say that I looked at Belize and Panama and St. Kitts, all to incorporate a company there, and Stripe told me, no, we don't do any of those. So just to save someone else the hassle of going down that rabbit hole, uh, I don't know. It is what it is. It's difficult to do processing payments for companies outside the US. So that's my
And
practical tip.
there is something like I know you can't make every decision based on taxes. You just like on the lowest tax rate. Like I would, if I was doing that, I would live in Puerto Rico. I don't want to live in Puerto Rico. I understand how much money I could save in taxes, but it's an island in the middle of nowhere where it's the infrastructure is falling apart. They lose internet a couple times a day. The power goes out. They get hit by hurricanes. It's beautiful. The beaches are great. The sailing's great. The fishing's great. It's too hot. It's too far away. Like I'm willing to pay more to live in a place that has higher tax. Like you have to consider a lot more factors than just the money. Um, but yeah, there's the money is also something to consider. But yes, so don't uh, don't build a business on Stripe if you can avoid it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you
All
got to get
right,
money
Senor
somehow. That's a
Watts.
business. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, brother. It was good talking to you, and everybody, stay free. Closing tagline. Come on, do it.
Oh, okay, close to tag. I don't have a one that I stick with. I think I said stay free on the Monero things. I'm just going to say, everybody, Henry's right. Stay free.
All right.